Acts chapter 3. I know. I thought we'd never get out of Acts chapter 2, but here we are in Acts chapter 3. One day, Peter and John were going to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. Now, I've talked about how in ancient times, the way they looked at and viewed time is different than how we do. We look at time through the lens of minutes, right? That's our frame. Theirs was merely hours. And I think it's valuable for us to remember that one thing makes a huge amount of difference in the way people live their lives in century one. About 3 o'clock. That was the middle of the afternoon, and it was a traditional time where Israelites and Jews knocked off their normal work for a time of prayer. And if you could, going to the temple was a good thing to do at about 3 o'clock. If you lived in Jerusalem or were visiting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be a time of prayer. And God-fearing, God-honoring Jews would gather at the temple for prayer. Now, Peter and John were God-honoring Jews, and evidently it was their tradition to make their way to the temple at 3 o'clock for prayer time. Verse 2, now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. If you live or visit a city of size, and I by that I mean whatever you think size is, but we're not talking about small towns so much. In Oklahoma City, there are people nearly every time I go to a particular intersection, or there's like 3 or 4 that I frequent, and there's nearly every day there's somebody there holding a sign that says, please help, no job, God bless you. And I'm not saying these are bad people. I'm just saying I'm never quite sure what to do about, how do I respond? One of my favorite ones, because it seems so honest, was in Las Vegas. When you got off the Interstate 15 near the Strip, there was a guy, I must have seen him half a dozen times. He was standing there, off, not on the road, but by the side of the road. And he had a cardboard sign that said, need money for beer, just being honest. Well, I didn't want to support the guy's alcoholism, but I did at least tip my cap to say, well, thanks for being honest. Now, that's not the kind of, it's going to sound awful toward these people, but that's not the kind of begging that this guy in Acts chapter 3, verse 2 did. In ancient times, if you were disabled, and this guy was, he was disabled, he was lame. He was unable to walk, and that equaled unable to work. There was no such thing as wheelchairs. He had to be carried to the Beautiful gate of the temple by friends or family every day. And there he had a little station, and he begged for what, 200 or 300 years ago were labeled as alms. There are absolutely, legitimately needy people who, if they're going to survive, it'll be on the basis of the generosity of others. In his day, a, a man like him, born lame, born with legs that wouldn't work, born unable to contribute to the welfare of his family and later of himself. Their only option was to beg. I don't think they were treated with kind of disdain that we might have today for begging. A devout Jew entering the temple through the beautiful gate would have seen them and thought, I suppose this is an opportunity for me to be generous, and so I'll put something in. Rarely wasn't much, but pennies generally, and there weren't pennies back then, but mites, which were worth a fraction of a penny. But this was his means of survival. Well, in verse 3, when he saw Peter and John about to enter the temple, he asked them for money. It's not, brother, can you spare a dime? But it kind of was. And then verse 4, Peter looked straight at him, as did John. And so it's not like they kind of looked away to keep walking, right? Which is, it's probably bad, but that's kind of what I do when I get to those intersections I told you about. Try to not make eye contact. That's, But Peter and John made full-on eye contact. Then Peter said, "Look at us." And the NIV has an exclamation point after that. Now, in the Greek, which is the language that Luke wrote in, there were no punctuation marks. So it's an interpretation of the idea that this was an imperative command. Look at me. Look at us. So the man gave his attention, expecting to get something from them, because that's usually, if a person of means was going to give a significant amount of money, that person wanted to be acknowledged. Look at me. Watch what I'm about to do. Well, verse 5, so the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. But what he was expecting or hoping for was not exactly what happened. This verse 6, then Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." What would you have thought if you had been that guy, that lame guy? Okay. There's no real indication that this guy, we don't even know this guy's name, but there's no real indication that this guy knew who Peter and John were. Like, they could have been, for all he knew, strangers. Certainly not acquaintances. On the other hand, perhaps he had. It's possible that he had some knowledge of who they were, because they had made a big impression. I mean, this is big rock that left ripples, right? Well, Peter said, again, this is interesting to me, that Peter is the guy that does the talking. It kind of started at Pentecost, and it was really it's no surprise to me because Peter was a verbal individual. Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. Verse 7, taking him by the right hand, he helped him up. Oh gosh, there's so many, I think, valid things to connect here. First of all, Peter was responding to this man's needs. It's not like he did not look the other way. He looked him right in the eye. He's responding. And it's not like Peter said, go get a job. Quit this, okay? Don't do this anymore. No, he said, hey, I don't have money. But what I have, I give to you. That's an interesting concept. And the word I would attach to it is generosity. And you might say, well, this didn't cost Peter anything. Not financially, But he had the generosity to say, I'm going to give you what I do have. And what I have, here, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. And he didn't then just stand there and wait for the guy to get to his feet. He extended his right hand. The right hand, without getting gross, the right hand was your clean hand. To have the left hand extended was a kind of a backhand. It was like it was a slight. It was an insult. He extended the right hand, took the man's right hand, and he lifted him to his feet. He helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. Whose faith made this happen? Was it the lame beggar's faith? Well, if it was, we get no indication of that. Was it Peter and John's faith? It's not even ever stated. But of the three, I'd say those two were the ones who had faith. But can you imagine? Now remember, he's a full-grown man. We don't know what his age was, but he was a man, full-grown, who had never been able to walk. His ankles and feet had never supported him. Can you imagine what must have been going through this guy's mind as Peter extended his hand? What have I got to lose? He must have thought. He took his hand. Peter helped him to his feet, and instantly his feet and ankles became strong. Oh my goodness. Well, look what he did in verse 8. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. I'm trying to put myself in his place, and if it had been me, I think I would have been going, hey, look at me, I'm walking. I mean, I think I would have made a big deal out of it. How could I not? Jumped to his feet and began to walk. There's even a little bit of a metaphor in that. When Jesus saved me, took me from a state where I was unable to walk, and he made me able to walk with him, to walk a full, abundant life. Well, okay. There's more to what this lame guy did, and we're going to come back to that next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.